Dr. Laura Froyen. I have my PhD in Human Development and Family Studies with a specialization in couple and family therapy. I am a peaceful parenting and respectful relationship coach and a self-compassion advocate. I give parents tools and support so that they can stop yelling, ditch the guilt, and rediscover authentic connection with their children, with their partners, and most importantly, with themselves. So today we're going to start talking about self-compassion and how it compares with self-esteem, and how we can start harnessing the power of self-compassion to improve our parenting and our relationships, and hopefully guide our children to having more self-compassion for themselves too, and why we want that, why that's a goal. So today we're going to be focusing on self-compassion, and I'm going to be sharing some of my favorite research that suggests that self-compassion is different than self-esteem, and why we may want to focus more on self-compassion and when we're cultivating it in both in ourselves and in our children. And then we'll also be ending with a compassion-based meditation that you can use for yourself in moments of stress, and that you can easily adapt to stressful situations with your children, and even helping your children through their own stressful situations. So self-compassion is something that I'm hugely passionate about, mainly because of how life-changing it has been for me in my own process of letting go of perfectionism and coming into myself. So as a recovering perfectionist, I was someone who felt like I was never good enough. I propped myself up with my education and my degrees and academic awards. And for me, self-compassion has been the thing that has allowed me to live my life more authentically, to be more comfortable in my own skin, to let go of perfectionism and comparison, and to start having deep connection with my family. So I want to offer you a little information about it, and a small little mini practice that you can do to start bringing some of these things to yourself and to your own family. I also think that self-compassion is a key piece to balanced parenting, especially if balanced parenting is your goal. And by balanced parenting, I mean not only coming from a place of both warmth and limit setting with our kids, so balance in that perspective, but also balance from the point of that we aren't losing ourselves to our parenting, or losing ourselves in other relationships, that we are able to kind of maintain an even keel through this parenting journey that we're on. I think self-compassion is key to this, and when we cultivate it, that's when we can truly shine as parents and as partners, and really authentically connect with our loved ones and with ourselves. So first, I want to share, get a sense of where we all are in terms of self-compassion and self-esteem. So I'm going to ask for some participation. If you're listening, please, I'm only going to ask you to put numbers on, okay? So nothing big. But on a scale of 1 to 10, I want to get a sense for where you are in terms of self-esteem. So if a 1 is you feel terrible about yourself most of the time, and a 10 is you feel great about yourself. So I want you to start thinking about the things that determine your self-esteem or your self-worth. So the things that determine this, is this whether or not you've yelled at your kids? Perhaps it's whether or not you fit into your pre-mom clothes. Perhaps it's your performance at work or the tidiness of your house. And I'm going to be talking about self-compassion as kind of an antidote to that, because research shows us that self-compassion is very closely related to stability in our sense of self-worth, whereas self-esteem is not. So self-esteem is more related to having a very variable sense of self-worth, okay? And so I also want to ask you about your sense of self-compassion. So where are you on a scale from 1 to 10 in terms of self-compassion, with 1 being very hard on yourself with almost no room for making mistakes, and 10 being very completely self-forgiving? And having a sense of where you are in terms of self-compassion now can help us as we move forward and start cultivating the skill. You can improve, and so knowing the number you are now helps us know kind of where we are in the future when we've been working on it. I want to ask you, so when you have a moment or an opportunity where you can offer yourself some feedback about the things that just happened or what's going on in your life, whose voice is in your head, and what does it sound like, and what does it feel like? What are the qualities of it? Is it gentle or is it harsh? Most of us speak, Aaron says 5, okay? And Wendy says definitely depends on what aspect. And let's see, And we have an 8. It says, I'm very pregnant, so I've been more compassionate with myself than usual. And I allow myself to have excuses. I think that's wonderful. Being pregnant is this time where we definitely need more self-compassion. I think all of us need more self-compassion. And I think we all have to be aware of the voice that we're speaking to ourselves in. I oftentimes, if I don't catch myself and if I'm not active in cultivating it, I will use a voice with myself that I would never use with my children. Or maybe I would only use with my children on my very worst days. And I use a voice with myself that I would hardly ever use with my partner. And it's interesting to me how much we reserve that harsh, critical, judgmental voice for ourselves. And so what self-compassion does is it helps ease up and ease out of that self-criticism and that self-judgment and that harsh voice, so we can be a little bit more gentle with ourselves. So let's talk a little bit about self-esteem, because I think that for the people in my generation, so I'm 34, we grew up in the age where building our self-esteem was a thing. Right? And so, I mean, I even remember in DARE being taught about self-esteem and how if we have a high self-esteem, we're not going to be engaging in risky behaviors like drugs and alcohol, which is really interesting because that's not actually what the research shows. And so I wanted to share a little bit of research on self-esteem with you. So self-esteem, as far as the definition, is an evaluation of our worthiness. So how good or valuable we are as a person. And it's often based on outside perspectives on the things that we think are important. And this is often individual, but it's also heavily influenced by the cultural context that we are in. And it can make it really difficult to live a true life, a life that's true to our values. And it can make it difficult to have a firm sense of ourselves as worthy beings. It can also cause us to be very competitive and to behave in ways that help us to avoid losing this positive view of ourselves. This can really get in the way of being authentic, and it's also why many people lie and cheat, get defensive, and put others down. They do this often unconsciously in an attempt to build themselves up. And for years now, this focus has been, especially with children, on building self-esteem. But the decades of research on this are actually starting to show that perhaps this is a mistake and it's not really where we should be putting our energies and our efforts. So research is suggesting that focusing on self-esteem, especially contingent self-esteem, so self-esteem that is based on outside evaluations like performance in a sport or doing well on a math test, all of those things having something to do with your sense of self-worth are really negative. So I'll tell you a personal story with this struggle for myself. I worked hard in high school and managed to get into a pretty good college. And unfortunately, I don't know that I was really prepared for the level of math skills that I needed in one of my first calculus class in college. And as I was preparing for my final, having done really poorly for myself, from my standards on the first 2 tests. And I mean, I did poorly for anybody's standards. I got like D's on my first tests. As I was preparing for the final, I spent about half of my study time filling a notebook with the words, "My ability to do math does not define my worth as a person." Okay, so this is me as a freshman in college, and I don't even know where that came from. I certainly didn't know anything about self-compassion. I didn't know anything about treating myself gently. Having been a high-achieving perfectionist, I was very bad at treating myself gently. But this was my first attempt at doing this. And I nailed it pretty good. And I ended up doing much better on that exam. I did study hard for it. And I ended up getting a C in that class, which as a straight A student before then and actually after then, that C has always been a mark of pride for me because it was the first time I actually had to work really, really hard to do well at something. And I also worked really hard to not let my performance on an exam determine my worth as a person. And that was a life-changing moment for me. And it actually helped propel me into my studies in psychology and motivated me to pursue higher education on some of these topics. So I don't know if that resonates with any of you, that story of sitting there and feeling like the thing that is so important to us, that we've been told is so important to us, and we're failing at it, and how hard that can be on our self-worth, right? And our idea, our vision of ourselves. And so this is where self-esteem comes in, because it's very variable. It's very dependent on outside sources and outside evaluations, and it's dependent on things that sometimes are simply beyond our control. And so what is the antidote to an inflated or a deflated or a shaky sense of self-worth or self-esteem? The antidote is self-compassion. And that's what we're talking about today. So my favorite researcher who focuses on self-compassion in her work, her name is Dr. Kristen Neff. She does beautiful research that's really accessible and beautifully written. And she also has a great website that I shared in the link, where she has lots of guided meditations, so many free resources. You should definitely check it out. She's like the best in this field. And her research is amazing. So I'm going to share her definition of self-compassion, and we'll dig into that a little bit too. Okay, so there's 3 pieces to self-compassion, and the first is self-kindness versus self-judgment. And a self-compassionate person focuses on self-kindness. Self-kindness is the ability to be caring and understanding with ourselves, to treat ourselves gently and with grace rather than with criticism and harsh judgment. When things are hard or we've made a mistake, people who are self-compassionate can turn inward and offer themselves comfort and soothing, rather than beating ourselves up or gritting our teeth and muddling through it, or distracting ourselves with various other kind of outside soothing methods. Drinking alcohol, eating foods, TV, Facebook, all of those things we can use as distractions to distract ourselves from the suffering. So a self-compassion practice allows us to turn inward and provide soothing that's real and true soothing. And then the next piece is focusing on the reality of common humanity. So the idea of common humanity means that as a human, there are certain pieces of our experience that we all have, no matter where we are across the globe. And tapping into this sense of common humanity helps us feel not so alone and not so isolated in our sense of our suffering in this world. When we can also view difficult times through a lens of common humanity, so that we don't feel so alone in our suffering and pain. The idea that this is part of the human experience. What I'm experiencing now has been experienced before, over the eons, and it will be experienced again when I'm long gone. That this is part of my place in our human story. Can really relieve suffering and relieve the isolation that can come with suffering. And then the next piece is mindfulness. So this is the ability to be in the present moment, to be aware of the fleeting nature of our thoughts, of life, of our judgments, and to be fully present so that we can fully experience our lives, even when that experience is painful. So the sense, the desire to flee when we're experiencing something painful takes us out of the present moment. When we distract ourselves with our phone or with food or with alcohol, it takes us out of that present moment. And so self-compassion practices bring us into the present moment and allow us to fully experience that suffering so that we can then let it go and not have to experience it alone anymore today or in the future. Do I have any questions about any of those things that we're talking about, or it all is making sense and resonating? I hope so. Self-compassion work is one of my biggest passions. And again, it's helped me so much in my life, particularly after my car accident a few years ago. Having worked hard to become a professor and then having this life-changing car accident, the only way I was able to be brave and make a career change that was pretty significant was through lots of self-compassion work. Lots of crystallizing moments where I saw myself as a human, not a product of my accomplishments. And then from that point forward, being able to step away and leave a track that lots of people were counting on me to be on, and follow what I knew was right for me and for my family, was so much easier. And now here I am. I'm getting to talk with all of you on these really important, deeply valuable topics. And that is just even more affirming to me. And I, of course, will make mistakes. I will continue to make mistakes. I make mistakes as a parent and as a partner every day. And I will make mistakes in my work with you. And that's, again, that's part of common humanity, right? That's part of our experience here on earth. And I'm going to be kind to myself. I'm going to be forgiving of myself. Like last week when I accidentally went live on my personal page instead of my business page, I could have spent time wallowing and beating myself up on that. But instead I just said, whoops, and here it is. And I trusted all of you to find it if you needed it. And guess what? You did. It was great. So getting a sense of being a little bit easier on ourselves can really free us up in some amazing ways. So research shows that self-compassion has a profound effect on well-being overall and on life satisfaction, on emotional intelligence and happiness and curiosity and wisdom and self-initiative and connectedness. So those who are more self-compassionate also experience less criticism, less fear of failure, less overall anxiety, and even less disordered eating. So this is a really powerful tool that we have here. And self-compassion, one of the things that self-compassion is not is self-pity. So self-pity is where someone wallows in their suffering and their pain, forgetting about other people's experiences. And self-compassion is kind of an antidote to self-pity because of the common humanity piece of it. And self-compassion is also not self-indulgence. And self-indulgence is where there is little motivation towards improving where you are. Self-compassion is based in a genuine caring for the self. And what research shows is that people who are self-compassionate actually make greater strides towards realizing their goals. They do it in much healthier ways, and their goals, the changes that they've made, are longer lasting because they incorporate them as into the sense of who they are, rather than using them as a reflection of their worth, if that makes sense. So self-compassion is related to a more stable sense of self-worth, whereas self-esteem is not. So for those of you who feel like your self-esteem, your sense of being worthy is totally dependent on factors outside of your control, like whether or not your kid had a good night's sleep and then they're not grumpy with you, and so then they're compliant and they follow directions, and then, oh yes, I'm feeling good, I'm a good mom, and then the second they have a meltdown, that sense of self-esteem is out the door, that's a clue that self-esteem isn't working for us and we need to make a change. So, and we can see, I guess, how vital self-compassion is for our sense of well-being and our sense of self-worth as parents and as partners and as humans. And then there's another piece of this too that I think is so important. And this is where it comes to our kids. Right? So often parents get to a place where they won't do something good for themselves if it's just for themselves. And so I always like to add the piece of how this is good for your kids too. As we know, we have these beautiful little humans, these little learning minds who are in front of us and watch us and observe us all day. And one of their most natural and potent ways to learn is through observation and modeling. And so we have a really incredible power here that we need to harness. They're constantly learning from our behaviors and our language and our actions. And if we want them to have a stable sense of self-worth, to be self-compassionate and resilient, it makes sense that we need to actively pursue those things for ourselves. What they see us do, they will do. And so when we spill a glass of water, our response to ourselves may be just as powerful as our response to them when they spill a glass of water. So if we can cultivate a sense of compassion and common humanity in these everyday moments, in the way that we respond to ourselves, it can help so much. So if we can shift even the internal language of, geez, I'm such an idiot. Even if we don't say those things out loud, we say those things with our body language as we huff around and get a towel and wipe it up, right? So if we can shift the geez, I'm an idiot, oh gosh, I'm such a klutz, those harsh words that come up in our brains, if we can switch it to, oops, everyone spills sometimes, guess I'll clean it up, those shifting our thoughts changes our behaviors. It changes the attitudes that our kids see on the outside. And even if we're engaging in self-talk out loud, it can be really helpful to our children when that self-talk is positive and self-compassionate. Let's see. Wendy says, my kids give me compassion, but not themselves. And Wendy, I want to ask you to reflect on that. I think that I wonder if you give them compassion, but not yourself. So sometimes we can get into this place, if we're not offering ourselves compassion, we can be inadvertently teaching that our children that others are worthy of compassion, but we ourselves are not. And so this is one of the reasons why it's so important to be modeling it, because we're not modeling it so that they can be compassionate to other people. We're modeling it so that they learn to be compassionate with themselves, right? And it's heartbreaking, Wendy, I'm sure, to hear your children not be compassionate with themselves, right? And I don't want you to take any shame or guilt away from this, okay? But there's plenty of time, and the children are beautifully moldable and changeable. And so we can change the environment that they're in and offer them a different thing, and they can make these changes. And Wendy Sue says, I thought I was doing it right. Well, yeah, so I mean, I'm sure that you are doing so much right. And I know you, and I know that you are, and I know you are this open-hearted, well-intentioned parent. And I don't want you to take away any piece of this, that you are doing something wrong. But we can all make subtle shifts that might make big differences down the road for our kids. So now I want to give us a simple meditation that we can do. So meditation is very short and very sweet, and it's something that I use in the moment for when I am in the process of making a parenting mistake, or making a mistake with my partner, or where I might be experiencing some stress that's a little bit out of my control, where I can't necessarily do anything in the moment, or where I've discovered that my mind is running down a negative train. This is what I do. This is an exercise from Kristen Neff that I've adapted and shifted a little bit. It's called a compassion break. And so we can always offer ourselves a compassion break. When we learn in peaceful parenting to always take a moment to take a breath and get yourself calm before you then go in to offer correction, so that you can be a calm, confident leader. Using the things that the meditation, this is a very quick, short one, can help you get to the calm before you go in, and make sure that you are parenting from a place of self-compassion. Okay, so we're going to do the meditation now. I want you to close your eyes. I'm going to keep mine open because I'm on video, but I really do want you to close your eyes. I want you to take a deep breath and bring your mind to a moment of suffering that you experienced recently. Perhaps it was a time when you handled something with your child in a way you wish you'd been different. Perhaps you were made a mistake at work. Perhaps you were short-tempered with your partner. So bring just one moment to mind and start to feel it. Let it fill your mind. And now begin speaking to yourself in the voice of someone who loves you and cares for you deeply. Find a voice that is soothing and kind and gentle. And say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. Oh, this hurts. I don't like feeling this way. Now take a breath and let it go. Say to yourself, this is a part of life. Others have felt this way. We all struggle in our lives. Another breath in and out. Next, say to yourself, may I be kind to myself. May I offer myself compassion and grace in this moment and in the future. And with a breath in and out. Now, this is a lovely way to start your day. And it is also a lovely way to end your day in those moments before you drift to sleep. I know that my mind is very active when I'm drifting to sleep, and sometimes it's filled with all the mistakes that I made that day, which sometimes there are more than others. And so taking a moment to fill your brain with those mistakes and then offer yourself comfort and soothing and compassion and connecting them to your common humanity, that these are mistakes that have been made before by others who you love and admire, and that they are mistakes that will be made again across time, that you're not alone in your humanity, is a wonderful way to end the day. And then these are also moments to bring with you into stressful moments in your life. It doesn't take long. It's just 3 small, short sentences, 3 nice, calming breaths. And then you can approach a parenting moment or interaction with your partner from a different place, a place where you're radiating self-compassion. And because one of the things with self-compassion is that it is very difficult to be authentically compassionate with others if we haven't also offered that compassion to ourselves, right? Instead, we end up being defensive and critical and contemptuous. And I know that many of you who are watching, that is not what you want out of your deepest relationships with the people in your life. You can practice this out loud in moments of calm, or moments where you are in front of your children and maybe you need to offer yourself some self-compassion. You can practice it out loud so that the words, that the language of it becomes common and heard and understood by your children. And then you can start, if they're a little bit older, you can ask them, would you like to start me to teach you those words? Would those words help you in moments that are hard? If they're younger and 2 and under, you might just start saying them, maybe quietly and soothingly, in moments that they're struggling. And you can maybe offer them a voice, because wouldn't it be so lovely if the voice, so often as parents, we hear our parents' voices in our heads. Wouldn't it be so lovely to offer this voice to them as they grow and as they become parents, possibly in the future, for them to hear your voice, this voice of common humanity, this voice of compassion and grace? Wouldn't that be lovely if we could offer that to them as a gift, right? But first, we have to practice it and offer it as a gift to ourselves, too. Okay. Oh, I'm so happy you were here today. Gosh, I feel like this was one of my favorite talks with you all. I'm so glad that you were here, and please let me know if you have any questions. Even after we've ended, you can still put them in or send me a message. And as always, I love talking about these things with parents. This is part of the work that I do with parents in my one-on-one sessions. So if you're interested and think that might be a good fit for you, I would always encourage you to go ahead and sign up for a mini session with me. We do 15 minutes together to find out if we would be a good fit, and I can answer all of your questions about on what working with me would look like. But this is a big piece of it, and you don't have to do it alone. So I'll put a link to my my free minis in this in the description here, and if that's something that interests you, please do, because this is my passion, this is my life's work, and I would love to help you with this. Okay, so I hope you're all having a good day, and I hope you end the day well, and I hope you're able to let go of any mistakes and realize that we are all human and we're all in this together. Okay, have a good day, be well.